Welcome everyone to our first and hopefully last virtual Forest Lake Association annual meeting. My name is Jerry Grutner. I'm president of the Forest Lake Association. And we anticipate everything's going to go well with this webinar. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. And of course, sometimes you have a few little glitches. So if we have a couple glitches, please bear with us. We've got some great people behind scenes working on this. And so I'm sure that whatever happens, we'll get it figured out. Our last annual meeting was actually in April of 2019, which we held at the Forest Lake High School. And I'm sure many of you were there. So it's been almost 2 years. So there's a lot has happened since then. And we hopefully can discuss tonight and indicate to you kind of what's been going on over the last couple of years. We hope to have a good turnout tonight. We did have 75 RSVPs, which means there's at least one person, maybe two people, and a lot of that. So we will get a count as we get along here, but hopefully we have at least 100 to 150 people show up for this webinar. This is a little different than a Zoom call. I think if many of you have been on Zoom calls over the last year, the difference here is that in a webinar, only the panelists, I being one of them, Steve McComish and Mike Kinney will be able to speak and you'll be able to see us. Everyone else is muted and no visual picture. You can't have 100 people trying to talk over each other and so forth. So, so you will be muted and you won't have a picture of yourself up there. That's how a webinar format is set up with Zoom. So just don't be thinking there's something wrong with your computer or your laptop or your connection, whatever. That's how a webinar works. You'll be able to see everything, but you won't be able to actually participate verbally with it. This webinar is being recorded also. And we intend to be able to have this recording on our website. In addition to that, LATV, the local public television station here, will be broadcasting this at some time in the future. So if you have to leave early, or you got friends or other board or other members of the Lake Association that want to see this, they can go to our website or wait for LATV to broadcast it. The other thing is that you will and are able to ask questions during this webinar. At the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A function button that is right next to the chat button. Do not use the chat button, use the Q&A button here for this webinar. So during our presentations, if you got questions, go ahead and type them in. Those questions will go back to our board members who are behind the scenes here. And if they're a simple question, they will answer the question in writing to you back to your computer. If it's a question that we need to answer later on, there's a 30-minute Q&A session at the end of our presentations. And what we'll do is we'll read the questions and we'll answer the questions. One of the panelists or a board member will answer the questions verbally for you. So we're hoping that this is as interactive as possible. You know, and if you do have any questions, don't hesitate, just type it in there and we'll respond as soon as we can or as easily as we can. This webinar will be over at 8 o'clock tonight. We'll be shutting down at 8 o'clock. If we have not answered all the questions, then we will respond back to the members with answers to those questions here sometime in the near future. And with that, I think we will get started. So first slide is our agenda. And so I will be speaking a little bit about the health of the Forest Lake Association. And then Steve McComish, president of Blue Water Science, will be talking about aquatic invasive species and other things that he's been doing on Forest Lake for many, many years. And then Mike Kinney, the administrator from Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, will speak on water quality, water quality projects, and boat inspection. And then I'll have a short wrap-up, follow-up, summary, and then we'll move into the Q&A session. Next. So I wanted to make sure all of you that are on know our board members. This is actually a picture from our website. These are our 12 board members. Rachel is one of our new board members who's down in the lower right-hand corner. And this group of board members works very tirelessly here for the lake and for the Lake Association and for you as our members. There's 12 of us. We meet almost every month in a board meeting that lasts, seems like forever, but we do accomplish a lot. And so I really appreciate the support from this board and everything that they do. Next. So 2021 membership. So there is 975 to 1,000 residents plus or minus on the lake. The Lake Association has 554 members in our database. And those are individuals who have responded to us in the past or were members or however we were able to get their email contact information. To date in 2021, 421 people have paid. So we have 421 paid members. That's 43% of the residents. We also have between 30 and today it might be 31 lake sponsors. And these are businesses that support the Forest Lake Association. We really appreciate their support. Many of the owners of these businesses live on the lake, some do not, but they want to support the lake and we really appreciate that. In 2020, there was 47 new homeowners, either that moved onto the lake or across the street from the lake or near the lake. Of that 47, 11 of those individuals have actually joined the Forest Lake Association this year so far. So we're pretty excited by that we're getting new homeowners. Now to put it into context, in 2019, we only had 415 paid members at the end of the year. We currently today have 421, first part of May. Our 2021 goal is to have 500 members. The board has a goal to increase our membership by 10% a year. That's an ambitious plan. It gets very hard as you get more and more members. I can also probably tell you that we are one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the larger lake associations in Minnesota with 500 members. So we are a very vibrant lake association. Next. So in 2020, the Lake Association spent $34,000 on the lake, for the lake, improving the lake. I'm not going to go through each of these dollar amounts here. You can read those for yourself. But what was important, I think, to point out to you is that in 2020, we established a $10,000 AIS Reserve Fund. We don't have all the species of AIS in Forest Lake. We think there's potential for other species to come into Forest Lake, and we felt that it was important for us to have a reserve fund put aside if we as a Lake Association have to do a rapid response plan or do something special for that. So $10,000 are kind of taken out of the general fund and put over into this AIS Reserve Fund. So that was part of the $34,000 that we spent for the lake. Next. So in 2021, we're expecting to spend almost $54,000 on Forest Lake from the Forest Lake Association. Again, similar dollars for many things, but I want to mention the two highlighted yellow things. First of all, I will be speaking shortly, another slide coming up, about the expanded and more robust treatment of Eurasian milfoil. We as a Lake Association can spend $18,200 plus or minus on that in 2021. The other thing we're going to do in 2021 is we are expanding the operation of the aquatic harvester or the weed harvester, and that may cost us around $18,000 in 2021. So overall, we're going to spend about $54,000 which is a significant jump from 2020. We hope to be able to spend something similar to that again in 2022. Next. So Eurasian milfoil treatment in 2021. Eurasian milfoil, and you'll hear this from Steve McComish too, has been in Forest Lake, I think, for the last 6 years. This will be the 6th year. And it has continued to expand, which is unfortunately one of the problems with that. We decided that we needed to have a more robust and vibrant treatment of Eurasian milfoil. The Forest Lake Lake Association is responsible for managing and for treating the EWM in Forest Lake. We are expecting to spend between $75,000 and $80,000 in 2021 for the treatment of Eurasian milfoil, primarily in First Lake. And there might be a little bit in Second Lake, which there has been in the past, but we'll see where that is. Now, we have attained $11,800 in grants from the DNR and from Washington County to help offset that money. But even more important than that is we have met with the city of Forest Lake, and they've agreed to contribute $50,000 to the treatment of Eurasian milfoil. It's critical that we begin to control Eurasian milfoil more robustly. If we do not control it and manage it, it will spread from First Lake into Second Lake and Second Lake into Third Lake. So we are very, very concerned that we need to manage it in First Lake and keep it in First Lake. And there's no proven method to kill it, but we can manage it. And the way we're doing that is we're using a new product called Priscillicor. Priscillicor is a herbicide that is being used in many states. It's been approved by Minnesota DNR. It attacks Eurasian milfoil pretty selectively. And the advantage to this is that it has a 3-year guarantee on that the growth of the milfoil will be very limited for 3 years. And if it's not, the manufacturer and the applicator give us a warranty and they come back out and treat it again. That can only be on beds that are larger than 10 acres. And we have 2 beds, or did have 2 beds last year that totaled almost over 30 acres. So this is where we'll be using this great product that we think, we all hope we'll see significant improvements in 2021. Next. The other thing we're doing is the aquatic vegetation harvester, or the weed harvester. This is still in a partnership with the city. The program will be similar to 2020, except that in 2021, we're going to be cutting native vegetation in First Lake, which we did very little of last year. We have gotten permitted from the DNR to potentially cut up to 176 acres on forest. To be honest with you, that'll be very difficult to do with one harvester. We may be able to cut all that acreage one time, but what we're intending on doing is only cutting the more major areas that have got very heavy growth of native vegetation here in 2021. In 2020, we removed 85 loads, almost 500 tons of native vegetation, which helped improve recreational value of Forest Lake. As we all have seen, water clarity is increasing. We all expect that the native vegetation will actually get more robust again in 2021 from 2020. And so the harvester is very important to help us manage the native vegetation. Next. So what's the health of Forest Lake? Forest Lake is rated as a C+ lake. Mike Kinney, in his presentation, will speak a little bit more clearly about that. It's not the greatest, but it's not the worst either. We have some things that are improving on the lake, and we're very excited by that. We do not have starry stonewort. For those of you that attended the 2019 annual meeting, you know that was one of my biggest concerns. It still is. We had 20-some boats last year come into Forest Lake from lakes that were infested with starry stonewort. So we need to be aware of the fact that this is a very high possibility of coming into Forest Lake. Continued heavy boat traffic. We all saw it last year in 2020 with the pandemic, how many more people came up the lake using their boats, many of them saying, wow, this lake is really nice, I'm going to come back again. I expect that we're going to see a lot of traffic again this year. It's going to be a continued heavy boat traffic lake. Fishing is good, we all know that. It's one of the premier lakes in the metro area for fishing. We all do well at fishing in Forest Lake. What's exciting to me is we have a large contingency of concerned lakeshore owners. That is you folks that are on the call with us, on this webinar with us, who want to help, are concerned about the lake, and take the effort and want to be involved in the lake. The Watershed District is doing a great job improving the water quality. They're a great partner with us and the city, and Mike Kinney will be talking about that further on. The other thing is there's continued pressure from growth in the area. We all see the continual building of homes, other developments around the area. That growth will continue to help impact Forest Lake, and we all need to be conscious of that. Next. So what can you do? Promote the Forest Lake Association through the yard signs and talking to your neighbors. So we had this campaign last year. Many of you, several hundred of our yard signs went out last year. I'm encouraging you to put your signs back out again this year. If you don't have a sign, or a sign got damaged or whatever else, there's more free signs available at Rapid Press outside their building there. Just stop by and pick up another yard sign. It is just a great way of promoting the lake to the community and to your neighbors. Join the Lake Ambassadors. This is a program we launched last year. It's members of the Lake Association that want to do more specifically. They want to be involved in some projects for the lake. It was kind of tough to get it going last year. Ken Wood, one of our vice presidents, will be sending out shortly an email to all of our membership, asking anyone who wants to be a lake ambassador, describing what the program is, and hopefully some of you will agree to be lake ambassadors. Continue to donate to the Holbrook Challenge and encourage your neighbors. I'll talk about that a little bit more in my wrap up. Be observant. Reach out to the Lake Association Watershed District. If you see something along the shore that isn't right, if you see you got problems in the water, if you think there's problems with fishing, if you think there's other issues, send us an email. We respond to everybody who contacts us. So please be observant, reach out to us, and we'll respond to you. I'd ask you to read your emails. We send out a lot of emails, maybe to some people too many, I don't know, but a lot of them have a lot of good information. So, stay in tune with what's happening on the lake. If there are some members or individuals who are on this webinar who are not members, join the Lake Association, please. It's not that expensive, and it helps everything in the area and the community. Lastly, let the city of Forest Lake know how important our lake is. Email the council members, email the mayor, email the city administrator. The lake is the namesake of the city, and it's important. The city is a great partner of us, a great partner of ours, but it's really important that the city understand, how the residents feel about Forest Lake, and that you really want the cities to support the lake. And I think that's the end of my presentation. And with that, I think we'll be turning it over to Steve McComish from Blue Water Science.
Well, great. Hey, thanks a lot, Jerry, and good evening, everybody. It's always fun to talk about Forest Lake, especially to the Forest Lakers. So what I was going to talk about tonight is kind of the status of the aquatic invasive species, but also along those lines, other complementary species as well. For sure, the native plants still dominate the lake, although right now we have some curly pondweed coming. But what I thought I'd do is review kind of the AIS conditions and some of the other water quality parameters that we found in 2020. So with that, I think we'll just go right to the first slide. And what we're talking about is in terms of aquatic species or in terms of aquatic invasive species, here's the big four, which are on the next slide. And those are curlyleaf pondweed, Eurasian watermillfall, flowering rush, and zebra mussels. So those are the four species kind of interest that are non-native. However, the native plant community is still very strong and abundant, and we'll have a few comments about the native plants as well. So then going to the next slide, we're talking about curlyleaf pondweed. And in 2020, it was an interesting year from a curlyleaf distribution standpoint. Most of the curlyleaf in 2020 was in Third Lake. And so we treated that pretty heavily. There was some curlyleaf pondweed, that's what CLP is. There was some curlyleaf pondweed in first and second, but at a reduced amount compared to previous years. So that's not unusual for curlyleaf pondweed to have years of heavy growth followed by years of some down growth. And sometimes there's just some unexplained variability that doesn't seem to follow any pattern. But we treated 59 acres. And then when we came back to look at the results, we found that we had very good control in Third Lake. So what was treated in Third Lake had very good control. And that's what this big map shows, is the assessment component. After the curlyleaf was treated, we had pretty good control in Third Lake in 2020. So that was curlyleaf pondweed. If we look at the big picture, if we look at which is shown on the next slide, if we look at the big picture where we put all our treatment sites for curlyleaf pondweed for the last 9 years on top of each other, you can see there's some patterns. First of all, it's pretty widespread in Forest Lake, curlyleaf pondweed, this non-native plant, which by the way is growing right now, and it looks like it's going to be a fairly heavy year of curlyleaf pondweed growth in 2021. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but you can see in these hot spots, those are the areas that have been treated over the last 9 years, and it looks like in 2021, curlyleaf is present in a lot of those areas right now. So we'll be sharpening the pencil, looking at where these polygons or these areas of heavy growth are, and then we'll try to preempt heavy growth by controlling curlyleaf before it gets too heavy and too abundant. So that was curlyleaf pondweed, and you can see that's pretty well distributed through all 3 lakes, but there is certainly variability from year to year. Some years it's heavier than other years. You can see, heck, we've ranged from a low of about 16 acres of treatment in 2018 to a high of about 169 acres in 2017. So it's varied between those areas. Well, Eurasian watermillfall, which is on the next slide, came into Forest Lake in about 2015. And since then, we've been fairly successful at controlling Eurasian milfoil and at the same time keeping it pretty much relegated to the first lake. There has been a few areas in Second Lake, and those have been treated very aggressively as well. And I think the good news is you can see all these black dots on this Eurasian watermillfall map. Black dots indicate no milfoil growth. So we have yet to see milfoil showing up in Third Lake, very spotty in Second Lake, only a couple areas. And in First Lake, it has been making its way around the lake over the last 5 or 6 years. So last year we treated 54 acres, and it's been a very aggressive treatment. And so far we've seemed to be containing it in the upper basins. So if we look at the growth patterns for the last 7 years, and that's on the next slide, we can see that the areas of kind of consistent growth are up there in First Lake. You can see where we have some areas we've treated 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row. Eurasian milfoil is very persistent, non-native species, and it does have variability from year to year. So we started out in 2015 treating 30 acres, a low of 10 acres in 2017, and last year in 2020 was one of our highest treatment years at 53 acres. So that's been the variability for now. We would like to continue to contain it as long as we can up in First Lake, try to also keep it from moving from Second Lake into Third Lake. So those have been the objectives of the Eurasian milfoil, and so far so good. Again, the Lake Association taking the lead in some of these excellent control efforts have allowed the milfoil really to be somewhat contained. Well, the next species of interest that we've been looking at for a number of years, and that's on the next slide, is flowering rush. Flowering rush is probably in a couple dozen lakes in the state. It's been in Forest Lake for a number of years. In this case, flowering rush seems to be relegated primarily to second and third lakes. So we've been tracking flowering rush since about 2014. What we do is we go out early, we look to where it is, where we're finding it. So we go around and survey the entire lake, and we mark it on our GPS, then comes back and it's treated with a chemical called diquat. Contact herbicide has been fairly effective. We have not been able to eliminate flowering rush from the lake, but we do seem to keep it under control on an annual basis, which means that it's still going to be present, but it's not taking over the whole lake. And every year we find some new spots, and in some areas or in other years, we're finding spots where it has been present in the past and is no longer present. So the chemical treatments have been effective at keeping it from really taking over second and third lakes. And at the same time, we've been fairly successful at keeping it from getting into and spreading in First Lake. So this is the extent of flowering rush. And on July 21st, which is our first assessment, and then the next slide will show we treated those areas, and then we went back to look at what was controlled and what wasn't. The areas that were treated had very good control, but flowering rush, being one of these perennial plants, continues to sprout as the season goes on. So we came back in August and did our assessment and found we had good control in areas treated, found some new curleaf that had sprouted, and so we treated that as well. And really the total treatment areas are 5-6 acres. So it's not overwhelming, but what does happen is it's fairly sparse but widespread, especially in second and third lake. So after this second treatment, so we made this assessment here, it was treated again, and the next slide will show the results after the second treatment. And there were only some scattered stems, and these green dots would represent late growth, less than a 10 by 10 square foot area, sometimes only a few stems. We mark everything though, and what's the good news is we don't see many red dots, which would indicate a widespread or a long elongated bed. So the control program for flowering rush has been able to keep flowering rush under control from the standpoint it's not taking over and not generating these large beds, which would be oftentimes right in front of lake residences, and at the same time could be some navigational hindrances. You can see that over here on the left, we did 2 treatments. First treatment was about 6 acres, and the next treatment in September was about 5 acres. We went on and did one more assessment, and the next slide, what we found is at the end of 2020 and after our final kind of evaluation, we found 0.07 acres of flowering rush in the entire lake, and 0.07 acres is about 3,000 square feet. So there are scattered stems, but at a very reduced abundance, although somewhat distributed yet. But you can see we have a nice decrease from when we first started in 2014 to where we are now in 2020. So that's kind of a quick overview of flowering rush. The last non-native species we're kind of talking about is our zebra mussels. And they were first found, and that's shown on the next slide, right? They were first discovered, observed in 2015 at these red dot points. So they were mostly in First Lake, but zebra mussels, as they put out their veligers, it's called, they're spawning in the lake and they float around. There's been no eradication, no successful eradication of zebra mussels. So we're kind of tracking them at this point. They are filter feeders. They're filtering out algae. Water is clearing up. And that's certainly one of the impacts of zebra mussels. And the next slide kind of shows some of the examples. I'm sure if you've been on the lake, you'll see them sometimes in the sand flats, but they have to attach either to a rock or a pebble, or they attach to each other to form clumps on sand or on sandy surfaces, or they're globbed onto a rock, or also what is the most common substrate in Forest Lake are the aquatic plants. So they're attached to aquatic plants as well. They are now throughout all the basins, and they will kind of still have the capacity to increase, but at some point they're going to reach a saturation where they've eaten a lot of the available algae that's edible, and then actually the population of zebra mussels will start to die back. So an example of how they are found on aquatic plants is on the next page, and whether it's a bulrush or whether it's a submerged native plant, you can see that they are abundant sometimes in these plants. So that's also why it's very careful to remove all plants for anybody who's leaving a lake, and that's why the boat inspectors are so important as well. What we have here is a situation that we have encountered in other lakes as well, from the standpoint that zebra mussels in these three basins will continue to increase until they run out of algae. And then they'll be food limited and they'll start to actually die back. And we're getting to the saturation point probably in First Lake. That's where they were found first. And as they move into second and third lakes and the algae goes down, they'll be food limited there as well. Right now, even though we see zebra mussels on sand and on some rocks, the most common substrate for their attachment are aquatic plants. So what are the ramifications of some of these zebra mussel populations? Well, in the next slide, we can look at native aquatic plants. In 2013, which was really prior to zebra mussel impacts, aquatic plants shown on the left with green and yellow squares, that's where plants are found. Green is light growth, yellow is more moderate growth. You can see that there's a lot of light to moderate growth. In 2018, the last time there was a quantitative point intercept survey, it's called plant survey, each one of those dots was sampled again, and you can see there's a few more reds, indicating that the plant growth was a little bit heavier in 2018, especially compared to 2013. So that'll be one of the ramifications of zebra mussels. As water clears up, plant distribution will increase a bit. They'll be growing a bit deeper, but probably one of the things we'll notice is that native plant growth will be a tad more abundant as well for a few years. Probably not necessarily in a long-term or sustainable situation. Plants will rise, they'll also become very abundant, and then they'll settle back down at some point in a few years to more stable conditions and probably less abundant than they are right now. So looking at, we're probably going to skip this next slide and go right to the cascade of Forest Lake changes. And what's going to happen with some of these impacts? We can expect improved clarity, and we probably already have seen that. the aquatic plant growth will be a little bit more abundant than it has been in previous years with the clearer water. Plants will grow just a little bit deeper, and fish will start changing some of their habits. And that is, the weed beds will change. Some of the denser weed beds might not be the best refuge for the fish. They might move some other places. And then the game fish will be following the forage fish. So fish will move as conditions change. However, we don't really expect the overall pounds of fish to decrease significantly. But we are finding our changes maybe in the fish community, but not necessarily changes like say in pounds per acre. We'll still have a lot of fish biomass in Forest Lake. So in conclusion, what we're kind of looking at is that Forest Lake is still a beautiful sheet of water with all these unique natural features. We have coves, we have bays, we have shallows, we have bulrushes. And even with the aquatic invasive species, it's still a healthy lake, and recreational opportunities can still coexist with the non-native species. So the ongoing challenge is we want to manage the aquatic invasive species with cost-effective methods, maintain the fishery along with the swimming and boating activity. So we keep the natural conditions along with the recreational conditions in top-notch condition. So with that, I usually in an open forum is go, now it's time for questions and answers if there are any. There might be a couple questions down here and we'll be working on those as we go along, I think. What do you think? I can answer some of these questions. Should we do that right now?
So Steve, I think
Steve, let's just,
yeah.
Oh wait, let's wait to the end, huh?
yeah, wait till the end, Steve. Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
I think next up is Mike Kinney.
Good evening. Mike Kinney, I'm the district administrator with the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. I'm now in my 8th year as a district administrator here. And I think Ken is going to run the slides for me. Thank you. So basically I want to cover 3 kind of main topics. One is some of our projects, updates, where we're at. The next would be some monitoring data updates. And then the final is on watercraft inspection. So, okay. So you may have noticed over the winter, we replaced the carpfish barrier out at the outlet there. That project went well. We were waiting about 6 years or so for the water to go down enough for us to actually consistently get that project done, but it's now in, so we're should last for several decades again or more. So, next, please. So this is maybe a little summary of what we already know, some of the things that are threats to water resources. And the thing I really want to touch on is a couple of things that we're working on, particularly in the residential area. We have our permitting program as far as land use and that, but on the urban side, we're seeing quite a bit of dumping of yard waste. So we have put out some signs in coordination with the Lake Association. We will put out more in areas to help people understand that that's not a good practice. Then the others, we hope to start working with more landowners or come up with a program we're evaluating right now to expand some of our shoreline and areas of such around the shoreline and lake areas, some kind of cost share program. We currently have a plant grant program, which I'll speak to a little bit more. And then also just on the ag side, there is still some agriculture draining into Forest Lake, and in some areas. And so we're still working with those. We've recently hired someone to particular to work in the ag sector. He was a seasonal technician for us, but he's finished his master's in soil health. So he will also be available to help residents in other areas as well. So next one, please. So again, just on this depiction kind of summarizes why we do some of our programs, and then also about our permitting program in particular, why we have concerns as the natural geography and vegetation changes. Then the increase in flow, and particularly the decrease in infiltration occurs. Even with some new residential areas, there's one in particular I was just out on earlier in the week. The subsoils that were being placed there were quite poor. And it's really an expense to homeowners, because when you have poor subsoils, then you end up spending, your water bill will go up substantially, because you're trying to keep that turf area green. And then it also has the additional adverse effect of taking any nutrients, fertilizer, or maybe in the springtime, or from the winter salts that are still remaining there, discharging them off-site into the storm drain. And then one of the things that a lot of people may not realize is that the storm drains, often referred to as storm sewers erroneously, they do not get treated in most cases. Once they go into the storm drain, they then head to the lake, and will have a negative impact on the lake. And so it's one of the reasons we have one of our main projects that we've done recently in coordination with the city is the acquisition and scheduling of what is called enhanced street sweeping. I'll have a slide on that later. Okay, next one, please. So, oh, I guess this is a duplicate. So maybe the next one after that. Here's a somewhat complicated diagram of what's occurring water quality wise in the phosphorus loads of Forest Lake. But if you take a look, there's quite a few numbers. The overall goal is for Forest Lake that the Watershed District has is 30 micrograms per liter. It doesn't really mean a lot. The state standard is 40 micrograms per liter. It's not necessarily a linear curve, but by getting to 30 micrograms per liter would in most cases allow people to see their toes, so to speak, in chest deep water or so, and that would be a reasonable recreational goal, I think, for a lot of people. It is natural for nutrients to enter into any lake. That occurs. There's a natural progression of lakes as such, and eventually they will fill in and become bogs and such. And so, however, we do not want to enhance that rate through human activity. So one of the things that we will be doing coming up in the future is taking some core samples on Forest Lake to see what that rate of sedimentation and accumulation is over the years. So, but generally we can see that if you maybe tap this to the next slide, there'll be some, nope, there should have been some diagrams there, but showing a box about how, what were the highest areas. For Second Lake, it was that Shields Lake drainage area. And then in First Lake, we have both the direct drainage around the city, downtown, and then that Hayward Avenue area. So, and even though some of the other areas are maybe green or brown or yellow, there's still discharges coming from those areas, but not in high concentrations or in total volumes, which then results in a total load. So, okay, next please. So some of the things that the district has been up to over the last, I guess, 7+ years, 7 to 8 years, these have all occurred in my timeline. And so those are the rough locations of these. And we have, so to date, we've reduced 768 pounds annually of phosphorus going into Forest Lake. Our goal, based on our monitoring and other evaluation, data evaluation, is 923 pounds per year. So to get to that remaining balance of 155, we're looking at those projects listed in the bottom right. And some of them will be more involved, especially the dead end street ones. And then the potential alum treatment, that's probably a couple years out before we really have a firm understanding of the lake sediment and such to determine if that would have the proper response for the expense. But the Shields Lake one in particular has been a very positive project with a lot of results. The residents on Second Lake, and then of course as it flows towards First Lake, should see notable improvements in water quality this year, especially discharging from Shields Lake. Next, please. You may recall this one being presented in the past couple of years. Top picture just shows the drainage area where we were doing some monitoring to evaluate where what we refer to as the external load, the nutrients and pollution coming from outside the lake. And once we establish the highest percentage or load, then we worked with the golf course and to place a project on their property. So I do want to clarify too that the golf course was not the source. We did sampling in various locations around the golf course, and they're based on changes in their management over the last several decades. The water coming off the course was actually quite good. They had, back in the 90s, reduced the phosphorus that they were using in their fertilizer, and it's had quite a positive impact. So the last photo down in the bottom right is a drone photo of us conducting the alum treatment. And so an alum is used to treat water, drinking water. You probably have it in your kitchen cupboard, or at least commonly it's used in baking and other forms. So it's naturally occurring element, but it binds very strongly with phosphorus and settles to the bottom of the lake, and we'll keep it there as long as it's not, as long as there's not a new accumulation covering it more than 5 or 6 centimeters. So next, please. As I mentioned, the street sweeper was a coordinated effort with the city. They through a grant that we helped facilitate. We completed a study of all the streets and what enhanced sweeping was. Previously, the city was sweeping twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, but based off of some past research that I was involved with, along with the University of Minnesota. What's really come out of this, again, and we verified this, we've been, the last 2 years, we've been working with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the university again, and to verify the benefits of this enhanced sweeping. And really what that means is that we want the sweeper out either once a week, once every 2 weeks, or every 3 weeks, or once a month, depending on the location and the amount collected. So this sweeper is a vacuum type, regenerative they refer to it, and it has a scale in it, so we know the weight of the debris that we're actually collecting. So then we're taking samples from each one and getting it analyzed. And so it's turned out to be a tremendous project, because in so many areas, they're just not feasible or reasonable locations at a reasonable cost to do projects. I mean, we're looking at some of these, especially the dead end streets, some of them might be thousands of dollars per pound of phosphorus. And in this particular area, with this practice rather of street sweeping, we're seeing that load reduction at 143 pounds per year. So, but at a cost in the same rough category of about $150 per pound of phosphorus reduced. So one of the better, most cost-effective return on investments that that really the taxpayers are buying out there, because whether it's the city or the grant money we got or the watershed districts, it's the tax dollars funding this. So we're really pleased with that, and we're advocating that other cities, any MS4 city, that they too evaluate this as a means to improving or protecting their water resources. All right, next one, please. Progress towards goal. Here's just a kind of a summary. We do have a full report, progress report on our website, and you can ask for that more directly. This has been one where we have quite a few metrics in the report, but as noted here, we're really looking at the 5-year average. That's what the MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, wants us to look at from a water quality standpoint. We know there's greater fluctuations, but again, the original goal at 923 and the remaining load is 155. So we're roughly 83% to meeting the goal for Forest Lake, if we're with a goal of 30 micrograms per liter. So thank you. Next, please. So this current then data is placing Forest Lake overall at a water quality grade of C+. You know, it doesn't sound so great. I'm sure everybody would like to have, everyone wants an A on the report card, and but those are kind of hard to come by. Lake Keewatin is one, however, locally that is in that category, and the only one within the district, and one of few really around the entire metro. But I think overall we're definitely tracking in the right direction here. Next, please. Just a visual of what this would look like, and overall the variation in water quality across the 3 basins. You can see that Third Lake has been more of a challenge and more turbid still the last couple of years. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll see again how those vary. But for First Lake, it's been quite good recently, and those are the 3 criteria that we use to evaluate the lake, or I guess the Minnesota Pollution Control does for evaluating lake quality, which we then use as well. Next, please. We will continue to do monitoring around Forest Lake, both with our camp volunteers, some of whom are present this evening, and then also with staff doing some additional lake monitoring and some tributary monitoring at additional inlets. We had previously conducted a diagnostic monitoring effort several years ago, but there are roughly 50 inlets around Forest Lake. So at the time we worked with the Lake Association and worked on testing the top 15 that we presume to be the biggest loads. Sometimes there's smaller loads, some of these little PVC pipes or things that drain to the lake, which can have surprising results. So we want to continue to look at even these small tributaries, because you never know when there may be some, historical source out there that people have long forgotten about or didn't know about. That's decades old and is contributing to water quality problems. So we're trying to get out to look at each of these and take enough samples to have a statistical value provided that'll give us, some confidence of where we are overall and where we should continue to focus our efforts. Because one of the things that I somewhat jokingly tell people is I'm trying to put myself out of work, and that's by, getting the lake to a water quality standard that, and enough things in place to keep it at that standard long enough. So that's our goal from a water quality standpoint. So, next, please. I did mention that we're doing some work with the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, both in terms of taking some sediment cores on Forest Lake. We have done this on several lakes around the district, and these are quite interesting. They're generally, the core samples, they're able to date the history of the lake back roughly 200 years, look at a lot of different factors, dozens of different components of anywhere from the algae makeup, diatoms, different chemical components, changes, deposition changes over time, and gives us a really good understanding of what the lake was like and what it is capable of returning to. So we look forward to having that work done over the next couple of years. The other is that we have them placing out some frequency buoys in some of the deeper areas around Forest Lake, so we can, on a much smaller interval on a continuous basis, monitor dissolved oxygen and temperature. And really what this does is then in the deeper locations, it'll tell us whether or not the internal phosphorus load within the lake is driving algae blooms. Because right now that's still a little bit of a mystery as to how that interplays with the nutrients coming from the external load. So we look forward to working with them this summer. Those buoys are out, and we'll have that data later in the year. All right, next, please. So district-wide, here's just a rough political boundary of the Watershed District, and you can see the various named water bodies within the district. Of course, there's a lot of smaller ones that are not named, but we still get calls or work on. So next, please. As we look district-wide, then we are in a similar condition as Forest Lake. We're 89% towards the state standards and 81% towards the district goals. So we're seeing, in fact, I spoke with the Citizen Assisted Monitoring Program, the citizen volunteer on Moody Lake, where we've been working for the last several years. And for the two sampling occurrences so far this spring, the rope on the Secchi depth reader or disc was not long enough. So that's 4 meters, or so, which he's been there 17 years, and he said he's never seen anything like it. So from a water quality standpoint, so we're pleased with that, because that'll mean cleaner water for Bone Lake, leaving Moody Lake, and then that goes down towards Birch Lake and School Lake, Little Comfort, and then down the Sunrise, and eventually to the St. Croix River. Okay, next, please. Watercraft Inspection Program. Next, please. So here is our reports over the last number of years. We've kind of started that program fairly small, just with Chisago County, but it's been growing over the years in terms of contributions, both from partners and dollars. So we had many more inspections per hour last year, but also just overall inspections. So that was, by far the highest. And I think everyone was familiar. It was a very busy year last year. Next, please. So this one talks about the occurrences of contaminants entering the lake. And so while there was this very large number of additional inspections conducted, the blue bar is the contaminants entering Forest Lake, and that occurrence was much smaller compared to the percentage of additional traffic. So that suggests that we're seeing results from the education overall. The contaminants exiting the Forest Lake, it's not surprising there's so much vegetation that we just are seeing boats with it as they pull out of the lakes, and the inspectors are sitting right there. So of course they remind people to remove it. So next, please. So if you're looking for something to do on a few weekends this year, we are still hiring for Watercraft Inspectors. You know, this is an old photograph because there's nobody wearing masks, but it's still part-time, 20 hours a week. Mostly the shifts are weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you're an early riser and want to take the 6 a.m. shifts, I'm sure many of our younger inspectors would appreciate that. Next, please. A couple things that if you want to get involved, not only do we have a plant grant program, you can follow us on Facebook. There are a number of other activities that we partner with other entities to coordinate with. One of our citizen advisory committee members has been doing turf talks, and I know Jack McKenzie is planning another one fairly soon. Well, yes, and also our citizen advisory committee itself, if anyone is interested, we would welcome people joining and participating in our activities through that means as well. We're always looking for more input on different things. So, okay, I think that's it. All right, thank you, Jerry, Ken. I guess maybe we're into our Q&A session.
Okay, hang on here. Okay, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Great presentation. I want to just do a very short wrap up here, and then we'll move into Q&A. Before we do that, I see that there's 4 questions out there in the Q&A. So if you've been holding off on getting us a few questions, go ahead and get those to us right now, and we'll answer them in a few minutes here. So first of all, in summary, first of all, I'd like to thank the individuals who helped put this webinar together. This would not have been possible without 4 individuals who worked many hours volunteering to figure this all out. And Ken Wood, who is one of our vice presidents, is the guy that is driving this whole thing tonight. So Ken, thank you very much, all the work you've done on it. Steve Stegner has worked on this very hard, and Chris Loth and Andrea Loth have also. So those 4 board members made this possible tonight. And I also want to personally thank Mike Kinney and Steve McComish for taking their time here tonight and taking the time to put their presentation together. Much appreciated. I think lots of great information that people like to understand about what's happening on Forest Lake. So Steve and Mike, thanks again for that. Ken, can I bring up my next slide? So in summary, I want to ask you to make sure you pay your 2021 dues. We have a ways to go yet to get to our target of 500 members, and we're still about 60 members short from where we were last year. So if you haven't paid your 2021 dues, please do so. It's very easy to do, as you know, on our website. We also send out reminders with our emails. So it's a great investment for the lake. If you have yard signs, I've talked about this before, please put them out. It's great to educate our community about the Forest Lake Association, and it does help bring new members into the organization. What's most important is that property values rise with a healthy lake. Its studies have shown that the lakes that are the healthy lakes that have very little AIS, have high water clarity, the values of those properties are higher. So whatever you're doing to help Forest Lake, you're basically helping yourself with your property values for those of you on the call that are homeowners here. I want to point out one thing here to you, is that the membership dues that we collect each year from you as our individual members and from the lake sponsors is between $30,000 and $32,000 a year. That sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. However, if you recall back earlier, we're intending to spend $54,000 on the lake this year in 2021. So we need additional funding for that. Next slide. And one of the great avenues for us to do that is with the Holbrook Challenge. The Holbrook Family Foundation offered again in 2021 to do 100% match up to $12,500 for any funds that we as Lake Association can bring in before August 1st. That means we have a potential to raise $25,000 in 2021 that can go towards Forest Lake. Last year, the Holbrook Challenge raised a little under $24,000. So it's not that far of a stretch from last year. I want to tell you about what we call the 4x4. And what this is we're trying to launch some sort of a incentive here for the Holbrook Challenge. And so over the next 4 days between now and Sunday, for any donations that individuals donate to the Holbrook Challenge, we have 6 lake sponsors. Next slide. We have 6 lake sponsors that have volunteered to match that donation. So in other words, if an individual offered $25 towards the Holbrook Challenge between now and Sunday, these 6 lake sponsors, Fred's Minnesota Wholesale, Lake Area Bank, Kearney Insurance, Olson Sewer and Excavating Service, Rapid Press, and Lakes Floral will match that $25. And then Holbrook will match that. So a $25 donation will become $100 between over the next 4 days. So I'm only asking you to consider that. It's a great way to leverage up the monies, and we can reach our goal here for the end of the year so that in 2022, we have the funds to do what we need to do for the lake. And with that, I appreciate everyone who has been on this webinar. We do have some questions and answers. Ken, how do you want to do this here?
Yeah, I think thanks very much, Jerry. I was thinking, see if Mike and Steve, if you guys can just turn your cameras back on. And I've got some questions here that have come in. Let me just, I'll share some of those with you here. So the first one, let's see, that is an open question, is there is a very large rock that is just below the surface on the 3rd lake by the weed bed. And there's been several people who have hit it. Someone stood on top of it last year during the boat parade. Apparently people have tried to put a buoy on it, but they're told that it's not allowed. Is there anything to be done about it?
Let me try to answer that question. And maybe I can even talk with Bob Muskie. I'm not aware of a large rock in 3rd Lake that is by a reed bed that is that shallow. There are a few large rocks in 1st Lake by the reed beds, if that's where this particular individual was asking about. I don't know. Bob, I've lived on the lake for 35 years. I've never seen or heard of a large rock in 3rd Lake. So relative to the large rocks in 1st Lake, I believe those 2 large beds out there are to be marked with rock buoys. I have not been on the lake yet this year to know if it's done. Bob, do you know if those rocks have been marked out there in 1st Lake?
Yeah, so good question. You know, Jerry, I agree. I'm not aware of a large rock on Third. Please let me know if there is, or somebody send me maybe a idea of where it is, because I'm kind of passionate about marking these things. On First, we have GPS coordinates on several large rocks. I just did check them this last weekend. There are 3 that are out there. 1 is marked properly. There's 2 that need to be moved. I have GPS located those, and we will be moving those soon. But just know that, you know, the channel between 1 and 2 heading, you know, north through First Lake from Second Lake, there are several rocks, but we're just trying to focus on the large ones. But if there is a large one on Third, please let me know, and I will implement that into the program as well.
Yep. Yeah,
Great.
thanks, Bob.
Okay, Jerry, the next question was, I remember seeing an issue at First Lake with curlyleaf pondweed. Did we see adequate treatment results last year in Lake 1?
I can take a stab at that. Actually, we did see curlyleaf pondweed in First Lake. We circled up some areas to be treated, and it was not a very successful treatment. Also, we did find some curlyleaf that came in after our delineation. We might have been a week or so too early for First Lake, whereas in Third Lake, there was a lot of curlyleaf. We had very good control in Third Lake. So building on that, what we learned from last year, we delineated just a little bit later this year, and I think we got it all. Now the question will be, can we successfully treat it? That's going to be, the applicator will have his have a go at it.
Super, thanks, Steve. The next question is, there was talk of removing native vegetation at the beginning of the presentation, and it would just like, Jerry, if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Well, yes, happy to. The removal of native vegetation is what the aquatic vegetation harvester does. We cannot cut any AIS by DNR permitted rules, because obviously that can cause a spread of any AIS. So we do a very specific delineation of where the AIS, both curly pondweed, Eurasian milfoil, and flowering rush is. And when we submit our permit to the DNR, all of those polygons are identified, and we receive our permit, and it's all GPS coordinated on our harvester, that we will not go into any of the areas where there is AIS. But we are cutting native vegetation, and that native vegetation is all species. It can be all species that we have in Forest Lake. When it becomes inherent to boat navigation, people being able to get their boats out from their docks, in general recreational value. And as I mentioned, we're permitted for 176 acres this year to cut. That will be extremely difficult to do that. That's a lot of acres for a little harvester. But we're going to try to hit those areas that are growing very abundantly and that are impeding boat navigation and access. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Jerry. I've got a question here for Mike. How would we, as an individual homeowner on the lake, encourage reduction of phosphorus chemicals?
Okay, well, so most fertilizers are supposed to be phosphorus free now in Minnesota. However, there is an exception. You can, if you're doing some new seeding or some other, or your soil test suggests that you need it, then you can acquire it. So it is available. So one of the most important things, if you hire someone to do your lawn, one of the things that I would most strongly encourage you to do is to take a soil sample, and we can help with that. Take and send it to the University of Minnesota. It's about $15 for a sample. So I actually have an ag background too. For 20 years, I was a certified crop advisor, and I can assure you that turf is another type of crop. It has all the same, growth requirements of any such crop. And so you need nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are the big things, but also pH is really important. So one of the most common occurrences of poor lawns is low pH. So, and that can be corrected quite easily, either by the individual going to Fleet Farm or a store locally, Hools, and to buy just regular barn lime and spread it. And but the other is then taking a look at your organic matter. You want 5% organic matter for a good healthy lawn, and then you'll also use much less water, which leads to less runoff. So overall, it's a matter of looking at the bag and trying to make sure that when you're buying fertilizer, that it has, when it looks at the phosphorus component, that it says 0. That would be the most important thing. And then also, again, if you need help with getting a soil sample taken, you can contact our office and we can help facilitate that.
Great, thanks very much, Mike. And to the earlier question on the rock in Third Lake, there's a couple comments in the chat and in the Q&A section. Bob, if you take a look at those, it gives some better indication where the rock's located. Next question I've got is, I think this one is maybe for Jerry. What is being done about the very limited depth and width between the entrance and exit of the channel from Lake 1 and the bay?
So I think the question is what's being done regarding the depth of the channel from First Lake going into the Bay Area. As far as I know, nothing about that. It is, the DNR does not allow any type of dredging, which in order to make that area right there deeper from Lake 1 into the bay, it would have to be dredged. And I can unfortunately tell you that the DNR would never approve that. So unfortunately, when the lake is low, lower water, it is shallow through there. I understand that, but I don't know what the solution is to that, to be candid with you, because we'll never, ever be able to get the DNR to approve a dredge through that area there.
Great. Okay, and so the next question we have is, it's about the weed bogs. What can we do if weed bogs come to our shoreline? Third Lake gets a fair amount of these throughout the summer from their perspective.
I can maybe touch on that. Was the question weed, W-E-D, or reed?
It says weed bogs.
Weed bogs.
Weed bogs.
Okay.
Maybe reed bogs.
I mean, I know what the reed bogs are. Reeds being the reeds that have broken off from the points, and those bogs, float across the lake on Third Lake. I understand that. Weed bogs, I'm not sure what that means, to be honest with you. So maybe whoever asked that question, maybe you can just type in something in the Q&A again about a little bit better explanation what you're asking, because I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Here's a question, Steve. You answered this one in the chat, but I think this one's good for everybody. What action, if any, has been done on milfoil in the large bay off of First Lake?
We've been aggressively treating all those beds there. If we find a continuous bed, bam, we circle it up, and then it should be treated. And we'll continue to do that on an ongoing basis. And in fact, we'll be out there in about a month to circle up the milfoil. It's a little bit early yet. We were out there a couple of weeks ago. We didn't see much growing milfoil. There's still some left over from last year, but that is the basic approach. Survey, circle up, treat, and then assess.
Super. And here's a I'd say follow-on question to that too, is what can residents do to help prevent the spread of milfoil and other IS to help reduce it?
Anybody? I mean,
Go ahead, Steve.
from a lake resident standpoint, you know, if you're going through a weed bed, especially with a milfoil weed bed, and it's in your prop, it might be best to think about stopping, bring up the prop, let the milfoil fall off the prop. That could be one way to transport milfoil from, like, say, first or second lake into third lake. It probably will happen eventually, but we would like to slow that as much as we can. That's one thing that could be done.
Great, thank you. Here's a question, Jerry.
Ken, let me touch on that too. I guess for all residents on the lake, you know, when you get into these Eurasian milfoil beds and you know you're in them because they get so thick, you know, don't just keep going through them, you know, get out of them, you know. Get out when you see them coming up on you when you're going through your boat. Don't just keep going through them. Go around them instead of going through them, because that will stop the chopping up of them and will also help you to navigate also. So
Great, got another question here. This one for you, Jerry. How would one get more information and also get more involved with the Lake Association?
wow, I love that question. So if someone is interested in getting more engaged with the Lake Association, first of all, you know, become a member. I assume you are a member, whoever's asking the question. I'd be happy to have further conversations with you about the Lake Association and what you can do to help. The Lake Ambassador program that Ken Wood, who you see right there, is spearheading and leading that effort. You know, we're looking for more volunteers to be part of Lake Ambassadors, and we want them to get engaged in doing projects for the lake and reaching out to their neighbors and homeowners about the lake and stuff like that. So, you know, whoever asked the question, give me a call. I'm happy to chat with you further about it on the phone.
Great, thank you. I just say, keeping this one going, there's a follow-up to this one. Who do we email for showing how important our lake is?
Good question. So as I mentioned in one of my closing slides, you know, the lake is important to all of us, obviously. But I think it's also important that the city officials understand how we as residents of Forest Lake view Forest Lake. You know, we pay significant taxes as homeowners that live on the lake. And it is the largest park, you want to call it a park, because it's a recreational park in the city. So as far as emailing individuals, I would encourage you to email the mayor, the city council members, the city administrator, and just voice your support for the Lake Association and, you know, request the support of the city, you know, for Forest Lake. The city is supporting the Forest Lake, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important that they understand how the residents and taxpayers around the lake view Forest Lake.
Yeah, no, just to follow on to that too is Steve Stegner, thanks very much. He listed the email addresses for the city officials in the answer as well. So you can cut and paste those.
Great.
And it was back to the previous one about reed bogs. So they are noticing the reed bogs floating. Is there anything to do about the reed bogs? Any action to be taken there?
So these are the reed bogs. Okay, now I understand. That's a tough situation. And unfortunately, I've been on the lake for 35 years, and Mike Kinney and I have talked about this. Our points that have the reeds on them is disappearing. And it's concerning, particularly the one there by the Aqua restaurant, and then the one over there by Shady Land Point. They're receding every year. And I don't know if they're breaking off for the winter months, but in the spring, early summer, we get these bogs coming across Third Lake. All I could ask you to do, I've had some individuals suggest this, and we can do that. If they're big enough bogs and you want to do this, drag them back over to the point with your pontoon boat or whatever, and, try to I don't want to say get out of the boat and stake them down over there, but try to get them back in there. They will reroot themselves if you can get them in close enough there, instead of having them just kind of be hauled away from your shoreline. So it's something we've talked about, and it's something we need to talk further about, because I'm concerned that these, and Steve, you've probably seen it too over the years on forest, these reed points are disappearing on us. So we need to try to figure out why.
Great. Here's a different angle. And this was open for, I think it's either a Mike or Steve question here, but is anyone tracking the salinity of the lake?
Okay, that's a great question, and I can absolutely answer that one. We started doing it just this past winter. So we will be doing that on a continuous basis to start establishing a baseline concentration. We know what lakes generally should be in this area. And for all the reasons that I spoke to earlier about the salt usage, or excuse me, about things running off of driveways, sidewalks, and roadways in the direct drainage areas to Forest Lake, without a doubt, that will change the salinity over time. And unfortunately, at this point, once a lake becomes more saline, there's no current technology to remove that. So prevention is really the only way to do that. So we've been sponsoring some best salt usage practices. We've been giving money to pay for training for the city crew. We're working with them and looking to expand our educational efforts with businesses and just citizens alike. Certainly from that standpoint, being able to use some sand or other things would have less impact on the lake, frankly, than salt would over the long haul.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So Jerry, we have one more question here, and we're just coming up to the top of the hour as well. So it's last one I've got is, can large milfoil beds or other AAS beds be marked with buoys to educate boaters and prevent the spread?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'll defer to Steve McComish. Steve, you've been on a lot of lakes every year. Have you seen any lakes where they mark with buoys some of the large AIS beds?
Yes, I have, and it hasn't been very effective, to be honest. So I think, Jerry, your initial comment was most appropriate. That is, if you see a matted milfoil bed, try to go around it would be the best advice there. The buoys are a nuisance. Folks don't really necessarily always follow them anyway. So I think find them and try to go around them if you can.
Okay. Thank you. And I got 30 seconds left. I'm sorry. I saw someone responded that they hit the rock. We also hit the rock on Third Lake on the northwest corner of the reed bed by Shadyland Point. I know exactly where your person is talking about there. I'm not aware of it being a single large rock there. There is lots of rocks there. It's shallow there. I've hit the rocks there. But if it's actually a large boulder that someone can take a picture of in the clear water now, then we'll consider marking it. But I think it's just a lot of rocks. I don't know if it's any singular large rock there. So whoever asked that question, if you can take a picture of it, we'll see what we can do with it. Okay.
Jerry, I agree. Moreover, if somebody can drop me a GPS pin or just locate that, we'll look into it further. But
sure.
I agree. I think it's a shallow area that there's multiple rocks. But if there's a large boulder that's causing havoc or a dangerous threat, please let me know so we can get it marked properly. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Well, folks, it's 8:02. We'll review the questions, make sure that we've answered them properly. If there's a couple of them that we didn't get to here, we'll send some sort of communication out on them. But I want to thank everyone who has participated in this, all the speakers, all the behind scene people that have worked on it, and more importantly, all the participants that have come into this meeting. So hopefully you've learned something. It's been a worthwhile hour and a half. And with that, like every other Zoom call, goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Good night.